Action. It's long been said, action speaks louder than words, but not nearly as often. In a speech a Ukrainian delivered at one of the rallies yesterday, the message delivered was the following: if you are able, get off your sofas, get off social media, and get onto the streets this day. The Ukrainian call yesterday was that which is a foundational key to success: action, visibility, tangible support, showing up. There are risks and there are costs to action, as John F. Kennedy once said, but they are risks far less than the long-range risks of comfortable inaction. Visibility was what Ukrainians asked for. As we stood next to them again as their war to resist the full-scale invasion of their country enters its third year, with millions of Ukrainians displaced or held in brutal captivity across Russia. Visibility is what we gave, in our millions, across the globe. The streets was for many where global Ukrainian solidarity started. Yesterday, in a remarkable achievement worldwide, it showed it remains there. Welcome to Tochnyi.
Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
And yes, welcome to Tochnyi. We are a podcast on Apple, on Spotify, and a plethora of other platforms. Please check out our interview, most recent interview with the Wild Hornets. Erlend and Daniela did a remarkable interview with this fantastic FPV drone group. It's really worth your time. Thoroughly recommend it. Tochny's latest research on FPV drones was published recently in The Economist. And along with other objective analysis on the week's events, we will be listening to voices which matter so much in this war, more than ever, Ukrainian voices. And we'll be looking at the actions in today's episode which have the most effect. Later on, we will be joined by the notable Alex Kokcharov, a stalwart of the London rallies. Alex is a risk analyst and has a focus on Ukraine. First up, we have the terrific Joseph Thompson and German Aid for Ukraine with the latest news from this week. So, over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll go ahead and get started with the news for this week. Maxim Kuzmanov, a Russian pilot who defected to Ukraine with his military helicopter last year, was found dead in Villajoyosa, a town near Alicante in southern Spain. His body was discovered in an underground garage on February 13th, showing signs of multiple gunshot wounds. A source from Ukrainska Pravda within the main intelligence directorate HUR of Ukraine shared that Kuzmanov had decided to move to Spain instead of staying in Ukraine. This decision came after his defection, and from what is known, he had invited his ex-girlfriend to visit him prior to being found dead in Spain. Spanish authorities were investigating the death of an individual who was later identified as the helicopter pilot, but there was initial confusion about the victim's identity. The Spanish court in Villajoyosa opened a probe into the death discovered on February 13th, and later local media was able to confirm the statements made by HUR as factual through contacts with Spanish law enforcement assigned to the investigation. Kuzmanov's defection in August was a significant event as he flew an Mi-8 helicopter from Russia to Ukraine as part of a 6-month special operation orchestrated by Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate. Spanish authorities found a burnt-out vehicle in a nearby neighborhood, which may have been used by the perpetrators of the crime. Next item. Ukraine was provided a substantial military aid package from Sweden, valued at 683 million US dollars. Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson highlighted that this aid package, the largest Sweden has supplied to Ukraine so far, addresses some of Ukraine's most pressing requirements. The military aid packages encompasses a variety of support, including 10 Stridsbåt, 90 class amphibious assault boats. Erlend's going to murder me for that pronunciation. 20 other amphibious assault boats, underwater weapons, anti-aircraft systems, anti-tank missiles, grenade launchers with ammunition, artillery ammunition, and medical equipment, among other items. Approximately 1 billion Swedish kroner, or 96 million USD, is allocated for the joint purchase of CV-90 armored vehicles by Sweden and Denmark together, with an additional 400 million Swedish kroner, or 38 million USD, dedicated to various training initiatives for Ukrainian soldiers. Next item. The American military is using its own funds to support the training of Ukrainian forces, a move that risks leaving the army financially strained in Europe amid the ongoing Russian invasion. The spokesperson for the U.S. Army forces in Europe and Africa revealed that they are currently funding the training for Ukrainians themselves due to the lack of an approved DoD budget for 2024 and no supplemental funding from Congress for Ukraine. This shortfall means the DoD has approximately $3 billion available to cover about $5 billion total in expenses and operational costs, putting their financial stability at risk overall. O'Donnell warned that without additional funding, they will exhaust the resources to train Ukrainians by summer, and that this would affect overall support of Ukraine, as well as ongoing operations for NATO forces in Europe and Africa. Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh emphasized the urgency of the situation, stating that congressional inaction is forcing difficult decisions that could severely hamper military readiness and modernization efforts. Despite the challenges, the U.S. military does remain committed to supporting Ukraine's defense needs so far, with ongoing training efforts underway in Germany, Arizona, and Texas. However, the success of these efforts depends on securing adequate resources to train additional personnel long term. Next item. The United States, European Union, and partner countries have each taken steps to impose new sanctions on Russia, focusing on different aspects of the Russian economy and its political elite. The U.S. sanctions, announced as part of a new package, target a wide array of elements within Russia's defense and industrial base, as well as key revenue sources for the Russian economy. These sanctions aim to directly impact Russia's war machine by targeting individuals and entities involved in defense and industrial sectors, focusing on sources of revenue that support Russia's military actions, and continuing efforts to curb Russia's military production and financial stability. Specifically, the US plans to impose sanctions on approximately 600 entities related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This includes imposing penalties on Russian officials and entities involved in the war effort, extending to those directly associated with the military industrial complex. Canada also announced additional sanctions against 10 individuals and 153 entities, while the UK added 50 new entities to the Russia sanctions list, specifically targeting munitions production. The European Union has moved to expand its sanctions regime regarding Russia by proposing restrictions against nearly 200 more firms and individuals deemed involved in the war. The focus of these sanctions is on imposing asset freezes and travel bans on individuals and entities, targeting Russian prison officials and other individuals linked to human rights abuses. And the EU sanctions are part of a broader 13th package, which has been facilitated by the agreement of all new EU member states, including Hungary, which was the last country needed to pass new restrictions. Although the majority of sanctions were directed at Russian individuals and businesses, both the United States and the European Union imposed sanctions on Chinese entities and individuals for providing support to the Russian military. In addition to the U.S. sanctions, extended to individuals and businesses. In addition to this, the U.S. sanctions extended to individuals and businesses situated in Kazakhstan, Liechtenstein, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, while the European Union also sanctioned individuals and entities located in India, Kazakhstan, Serbia, Sri Lanka, and Turkey. Next item. On Friday, the Prime Minister the border with Poland in an attempt to resolve the ongoing protests by Polish farmers. However, he reported representatives from the neighboring country's government did not attend the meeting. Polish officials countered that they never consented to a border meeting so far. Consequently, there appears to be no resolution on the horizon for the protests, which are jeopardizing Ukrainian exports and delaying the transport of essential weapons to Ukraine. Previously, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky extended an invitation to Polish leaders for a meeting at the border to address the ongoing blockade by Polish farmers protesting against Ukrainian food imports. This initiative, aiming for resolution before the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, emphasized the need for unity and solutions at both the bilateral and European levels, with President Zelensky expressing a readiness to be present personally at the border alongside other key members of the Ukrainian government for negotiations. The protests, marked by the display of slogans supporting Russian President Vladimir Putin, have been a source of concern for both Ukraine and Poland. The Polish government has yet to officially respond to Zelensky's call for a meeting. Polish farmers have resumed their blockade at the Medyka-Shahini border crossing, joining haulers in their months-long protests against the impact of opening markets to Ukraine. The protests, which have turned into a political challenge for Poland's new government, focus on the competition for Ukrainian haulers and the demand for financial support from the Polish government. Despite a previous agreement to end the blockade, some farmers have returned, citing a distrust in the government's commitment. The farmers' demands include subsidies for corn production, a lower agricultural tax, preferential liquidity loans, and the government expressed its commitment to meeting these demands. The protests against Ukrainian grain and other food imports have escalated, with farmers blockading almost all the border crossings, spilling grain, and burning tires. Spilling grain in vehicles. The Polish government faces pressure to withdraw from the import deal and halt Ukrainian agricultural imports, amidst accusation of prioritizing the Ukrainian interests over those of Polish farmers. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has been actively addressing the situation regarding the protests by Polish farmers at the border with Ukraine. Tusk expressed his intention to investigate why farmers resumed their blockade and their distrust in a previous agreement meant to end the protests. He emphasized the importance of not using the blockades as a method of protest and stated his commitment to protecting Polish haulers' interests in the face of competition from Ukrainian counterparts. Agriculture Minister Czesław Siekierski also pledged to fulfill these demands, underlining ongoing coordination efforts and budget considerations involving different ministries and the European Commission. However, protesting farmers have expressed dissatisfaction, demanding a more formal agreement signed by the minister. Next item. The last item for this week, yesterday on February 24th, a Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle targeted a significant steel manufacturing facility in Russia, leading to a substantial blaze. The attack occurred at a plant in the Lipetsk region, situated roughly 400 kilometers north of the Ukraine-Russia border. This facility, managed by the Russian steel giant Novolipetsk Steel, or NLMK, contributes to approximately 18% of the nation's steel production. The strike was described as a coordinated effort by Ukraine's military intelligence and the security services of Ukraine, the SBU, so HOR and the SBU, aiming to intercept in Russia's military supply chain. The targeted facility is known for producing raw materials crucial for the manufacturing of Russian munitions, including missiles, artillery, and drones, rendering it a strategic target for Ukrainian forces. This assertion was bolstered by footage that circulated on social media that you're watching now, reportedly capturing the moment of the explosion that sent orange flames into the night sky. NLMK acknowledged the incident on social media, noting that the fire started at 1:40 a.m. local time, and while the production was temporarily halted, they claimed no physical damage to the facility, or they claimed that damage was minimal. The Lipetsk factory is a pivotal operation for the company, specializing in the production of flat steel and accounting for 80% of the company's output. It's part of a broader Ukrainian strategy that targets Ukrainian military industrial capabilities and extends to their previous focus on infrastructure, which is essential to their strategy. Russian officials reported that Ukrainian drones were also intercepted over Lipetsk, Kursk, and Tula regions during the same timeframe, indicating an increase in the geographical scope and intensity of Ukrainian operations within Russian territory. So that ends my formal news segment for this week. However, John and I wanted to discuss, of course, there was some other big news that I think we couldn't go without commenting on. So John, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yourself?
Doing pretty well. Just read a lot of stuff, but other than that, doing good. I read some Polish names. Still a little, confused by it. Okay, John. So I thought we could start at the beginning here. So I would say the Russian Air Force hasn't been having a great month. Maybe I think by my count, over the last few weeks. They've lost, I believe, 6 fixed-wing aircraft, maybe more. So maybe we can start there with just the general situation, then we'll zoom in on the specific incident we want to talk about. Is that good?
Yes, sure. So obviously the past 2 years have not been a good special military operation for the VKS, the Russian Aerospace Forces. In particular, the past month has been rather brutal. A number of Russian fixed-wing assets, particularly Su-34s and Su-35s, have been shot down, presumably by the Ukrainians, over the course of a series of what are likely Patriot ambushes, specifically using one of the German-provided Patriot batteries. The losses in such a short span of time are rather serious. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but it's on the order of somewhere in the range of 6 to 9 Su-34s and 35s total, which again is rather significant. So pretty dramatic uptick over prior trends that saw steady attrition of Russian fixed-wing assets over time, of course, but just not quite so many in such a short span of time. And then to cap it all off, we now have the loss of an A-50U, or rather the second loss of an A-50U after one was previously lost in the past month.
Right. So maybe we can start there. Do we know anything about the first one conclusively, like now that more time has passed, or did we not learn much?
No, there was no physical evidence presented in general. The Ukrainians claimed they shot it down. The Russian telegram channels, in particular, fighter bomber, indicated that they thought it was friendly fire, and there was never any physical evidence indicated one way or the other. The A-50 went down, was just went down near Berdyansk, and the IL-22M relay aircraft that was accompanying it was damaged, but managed to land in Crimea, although it's not clear if that aircraft will be serviceable or is repairable again.
Gotcha. Is there anything you just want to comment on, like more generally about the Russian Air Force and sort of the state of things before we go to the most recent incident with the video?
Yes. So I think what's really important for people to understand, and very clearly most people seem to be unaware of this, is that the Russians and the Soviets before them were notorious for having difficulties with interoperability and deconfliction in terms of their fixed wing assets and their surface air missile systems and other air defense assets. It's been notoriously challenging for them. We don't have particularly good data on how they've approached this problem in the past 10 to 20 years, but we do have some data towards the latter end of the latter years of the Soviet Union. And in particular, what really stands out is that in the operational and strategic level exercises that the Soviets held throughout the 80s and the very early 90s, during those exercises, on average, about 20 to 30% of their fixed wing assets would be engaged by their own SAMs at least once. And in some exercises, that figure reached 50 to 60% of their fixed wing aircraft, which is mind-numbingly high. It's genuinely atrocious. And I say that, deconfliction and having robust IFF, identify friend foe implementations, it's a technical and a procedural challenge. It always has been. It is for everybody. Take a look at the United States and the coalition forces during the Gulf War and Operation Desert Storm. We lost a number of aircraft due to friendly fire incidents with Patriots, but the level at which this was occurring to the Soviets, simulated, of course, in their exercises, and what we've seen, obviously, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, February 2022, is just an order of magnitude worse. So I think it's important that people come into this with the understanding that this is always something that the Russians have institutionally struggled with. And there are some additional factors on top of that make this, a second friendly fire incident potentially of this magnitude against a airborne early warning control asset much more plausible than people might think just initially.
Okay, so we'll look at the video. There is a translation that Dimitri, your guy, does translations of stuff. They don't say anything useful, really. They're just kind of narrating what's happening. I do remember one person, I believe, says, I remember seeing this in a dream, which I thought was funny. But, so I don't think we're missing anything without the audio commentary in Russian or the translation. But, John, you can feel free to comment. Go ahead.
Yes, so I went over this video. Well, there's a range of different videos of the A-50U. I just focused on this one because it's the most relevant, but I'll summarize some of the others. What we can pretty clearly see, based upon a number of videos, is that multiple missiles were fired at it, and prior to either of them being fired, the A-50U was deploying countermeasures, specifically flares, IRCMs, infrared countermeasures. That can be seen on video, and it may have been deploying chaff radio frequency countermeasures as well, but that wouldn't be visible in this video. So very clearly, the A-50U likely knows it's been illuminated by a fire control radar of some kind. The aircraft's RWR, radar warning receiver, is likely screaming at the crew of the A-50 that they have been illuminated. And then they are very likely either manually deploying countermeasures, or it could very well be pre-programmed when the RWR detects fire control illumination. And yes, to the question in the chat, it's 2 destroyed, 3 damaged. if you count the one that had its radome bombed in Belarus. But as to the videos, we can see pretty clearly, again, not this one specifically, but some of the other videos, that looks like 2 missiles. The first one does not appear to impact the aircraft. It looks like it gets decoyed successfully by some of those countermeasures and explodes some distance away from the aircraft. And then the second missile impacts and destroys the A-50U. And so in the video that we have up on here, this is specifically came out a couple hours after the fact. This shows the launch of one of those missiles. My initial thought was that this was likely the first missile launch, but on closer analysis, I'm less certain if it was the first or the second. But in any case, we can very clearly see a missile fly out from Krasnodar, from Russia, towards the A-50U. And again, while there's some nuance to this video in terms of figuring out the timing and possible location of where this would have been launched from, this this directly demonstrates Russia firing on their own A-50U. So that should give us that pretty conclusively indicates that this was almost certainly a friendly fire incident, despite Ukraine obviously taking credit for the downing.
Yeah, I think we can't completely rule out the possibility that like some kind of Ukrainian involvement is possible, but there's nothing on the video that would indicate that. Would you say
there's no physical evidence to indicate that Ukraine was directly involved in the downing of that aircraft? There's just no physical evidence. I mean, there's lots of things that you can get into. I mean, for example, the United States has for many decades now worked on various cyber warfare programs to allow them to remotely change the pictures that enemy SAM operators will see. There's lots of stuff that you can kind of get into along the fringe, but just in terms of the information that we have directly available to us, I mean, we have physical evidence of the Russians firing on their own aircraft and essentially no indication of, say, a Ukrainian Patriot, Ukrainian S-200, et cetera, any of the other systems that they operate participating in this engagement. So again, unless we see some specific physical evidence come to light to that end, it's pretty transparent what happened.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? Like we're not suggesting that it's impossible that there was Ukrainian involvement, but all we have is the publicly available videos. As John said, there's multiple, and they all show the same thing. And that's what or I should say, that's what John's basing his conclusion off of. Maybe we can let people draw their own conclusions. Go ahead, John.
The other thing I'd add, and I'll be blunt about it, the Ukrainian government, they make up losses. They claim losses they did not cause or that didn't happen all the time. I mean, they do this with the aircraft particularly. I mean, if you just go look at the statistics for what they've claimed they've shot down, either Russian fixed wing or rotary wing, it's in excess of 300 in each case, even though the physical evidence is probably closer to about 100. And while, again, the physical evidence is almost certainly an undercount, there's going to be unreported losses and such, things that aren't going to be photographed, videoed, etc. Public Ukrainian government claims well exceed what's sort of physically reasonable, and what has been reflected in public-facing U.S. government and other allied intelligence estimates that have been released. So, again, information warfare it's a fundamental cornerstone of war, always has been. So, I think a lot of people looked at this incident and then saw the Ukrainian government, who were military intelligence and the Ukrainian Air Force take credit for it, and then took that as a absolutely true baseline assumption, and then attempted to generate explanations for how this could have occurred that definitely involve Ukrainian, that definitively have Ukrainian involvement just because the Ukrainian government said they were involved, which I think is a likely faulty assumption.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Go ahead, John.
Because I mean, and just think of the sort of an argument to simplicity here. I mean, what we're essentially looking at is the two most plausible. Well, the two explanations that come to the fore here is one of them is A, Russia fired on their own A-50U in a friendly fire incident, nothing much more to it. Or B, what a lot of people have been proposing for reasons I can't really fathom, is that Ukraine fired a Patriot, a PAC-2, or a 5V28 from S-200 at it, and the Russian SAM was engaging a missile incoming to the A-50U, not the A-50U. I mean, consider which one of those is just more, is simpler and more plausible. Again, not to say that the latter is impossible. It's not. It's just, again, on the basis of the physical evidence that we have available to, and again, sort of Occam's razor here, which is the simpler explanation? What fits the evidence that we best have in a simple, elegant way?
Yeah, because I just want to clarify, like, we see on the video what you think is like a Buk missile hitting. So what that tells us is,
yes,
it's clearly friendly fire. It's just a question of, we're not dismissing the possibility that there was some indirect Ukrainian involvement. We just, again, no evidence for it. But like, the point is, I don't think it's unfair to say it's friendly fire if a Russian missile hit a Russian plane, regardless of whether Ukraine was indirectly responsible in some way, right?
Yes, and I mean, I think it's unlikely that Ukraine had any involvement in this whatsoever. Obviously, we can't discount it. Can't really prove a negative.
Right.
But again, this looks dramatically more so like just Russian error and incompetence than anything else.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, all we have is the public evidence. We have lots of videos, and John gave him a look, and he drew his conclusions based on what he can see publicly, that's publicly available, and that's all we can really do. If Ukraine wants credit, I don't know, they would maybe need to present some evidence, and I don't know. It sucks we're dealing with Russia.
Think about it like this: is if you have a major Russian friendly fire incident, just think about it from an information warfare perspective. Ukraine is always going to take responsibility, because the only way that Russia has to counter that is to prove they shot down their own aircraft, which they're not going to do. So from an information warfare perspective, it absolutely makes sense for Ukraine to take credit for this, to invent whatever explanation they want to come up with and put that out there rather than say nothing. Because, I mean, claiming this only benefits them really from an info op perspective. So it makes total sense why they would want to take responsibility for this, even if it was just a Russian friendly fire incident.
Yeah, so like, I don't think we're suggesting we dismiss everything that Ukrainian intelligence says out of hand. It's more just like, we look at the evidence, right? When we're drawing our conclusions about things like this, it's based on evidence. It's based on videos. It's not based on statements by governments. That's just kind of not in our experience, like, the most to know the reality of the situation. So, I think we presented the evidence here. It's totally, people's own opinions they're free to make up their own mind about, what truly happened, and whether or not Horror's claims can be taken kind of at face value, or whether you want more evidence before you're willing to accept that. But that's just kind of the broad thing. So, John, maybe to like wrap this up a little bit, I wanted to get into just a couple things. Number one, like, what is this aircraft, which we probably should have started with, but I think that leads into like, how does losing this aircraft affect Russia's capabilities, and then sort of like, how many do they have and all that, John? So you want to go into that? Go ahead.
Yeah. So what the A-50U is it's an airborne early warning and control aircraft. So it's a large aircraft. It has a radome with a radar array on it, and it's responsible for performing airspace surveillance. So both tracking your own aircraft, as well as tracking, unknown objects, adversary aircraft, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, all sorts of things. It's just, general airspace surveillance. And so one of the things that it's critically involved in from air defense operations standpoint is that such an asset would be a central node for coordinating, integrating ground-based air defense assets, as well as your own fixed-wing assets, be it to perform defensive counter-air against hostile aircraft, hostile cruise missiles, etc., maintain general situational awareness. A airborne early warning control asset would be one of the centerpieces of that overall picture. What's particularly notable about the A-50U, though, and this is one of the technical nuances I sort of referenced earlier, is that the A-50U is operated by the VKS, the Russian Aerospace Forces. And the VKS, there's a specific branch, the VPVO, which is the Aerospace Forces air defense troops. They operate a number of Russia's SAM systems. They operate Pantsir, S-350, S-300P, and S-400. but they don't operate all of Russia's SAM systems. The SV, the ground forces, they have their own branch, the SVPVO, ground forces, air defense troops. They operate a number of other SAMs. They operate Strela, OSA, Tor, Buk, S300V. And what's really important, what's a key critical detail here is that as far as we can tell, the A50U, at least historically, certainly the original A50 and certainly the A50U, at least as of many years ago, doesn't directly communicate or integrate with the ground forces SAMs. It only controls and integrates the Air Force SAMs. So Pantsir, S350, S300P, and S400. It shouldn't really directly be communicating with the Strelas, the OSAs, the Tors, the Buks, or the S300Vs. It can provide data to them, but it's routed through multiple higher echelon C2 nodes. There's not a direct link. And that's very important. That's potentially very important here because, for example, if that missile was in fact fired by a ground forces SAM, that would make a lot of sense because the A50U would not be directly communicating and directing those ground forces SAMs, and they would not likely have a direct line of communication to them, at least as is described in Russian technical sources, which go into this, go into Russian operations, their concept of it in a fair bit of detail, as well as the deficiencies that they themselves have identified. And this is one of the things that they note is that they struggle with this integration because of this the siloization between their service branches and the division of their air and missile defense assets. And so in terms of the overall impact, this will degrade Russia's ability to maintain continuous airspace surveillance of Ukraine. Keep in mind, Russia has a number of these aircraft. They don't have that many, but they do have a number. So they will still be able to continue to operate these, to fly these missions, perform airspace surveillance. But because there's one fewer aircraft, that's going to put more flying hours on a smaller number of airframes. It's going to put more stress on a smaller number of crews. And it's going to be more difficult for them to sustain those operations at the same level of readiness and capability as they would having an additional A50 or additional two A50Us, as the case may be.
Yeah, John. I mean, we did a little digging. I know Erlend did a little digging, and I think you did to some extent. And we could find that there was some information floating around the internet that was like they only had 4, and that seems to be from. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so as best we can tell, they had at least 9, possibly more, between 9 and 14 A50Us. So the Soviets built around 40-something A50s, but when the Soviet Union collapsed, the new Russian Federation just couldn't afford to maintain them. So they basically left a bunch to rot. They sold off a couple. I think they sold 3 to India. And they basically used most of the A50s as parts donors to support like basically a dozen or so that they kept in operation. And those that they kept in operation were eventually upgraded to the A50M and to the A50U standard. And so prior to the invasion, there would have been, I believe, 9 of those that were operable, possibly 14 total. The others maybe not in operable condition. So this would bring their number of operable A50Us down to about 7 airframes.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, that like 4 figure came from old information from like 2017 or something, and they had like gotten more operational since, and we can't quite tell.
That was A50U deliveries between, I believe, 2011 and 2017. Between 2017 and the end of 2023, they delivered 4 more airframes.
Right. Yeah. And we can't quite tell if like, I don't know, some of those totals, like if they're adding to them or like not, so, but that's kind of our general estimate is they have a few more of these. What we don't know though is how many like trained crews they have that can operate a complex aircraft like this, right, John? Would you say that's a fair estimate?
Yes. So I don't know off the top of my head what the Soviet or Russian standard was for crew to airframe ratio. What I would say though is one thing about the A50U, and this is pretty well attested to in Russian sources, is that it struggles with crew endurance because apparently it's not very pleasant to be in for long periods of time. At least for the original A50, it's unclear how much that carried over to the A50U. So the crew workload and just the stress and the discomfort of being up in one of these planes for several hours at a time isn't particularly wonderful. So that's, having the loss of an experienced crew is likely going to have a fairly significant impact on their overall readiness. I should say more so than one might expect.
Yeah, I think so. And so I just wanted to make sure people kind of understood the broad picture here. I don't know, any other concluding thoughts on this general matter, John, the A50?
I don't think there's anything else to add. The thing that's unknown, so Ukraine also claimed to have downed an IL-22M. For those who aren't familiar, the IL-22M is a communications relay and airborne C2 platform. One almost always accompanies a 50U mission to provide, act as a comms relay to directly interface with, S-400s, S-300s, S-350s, et cetera, on Pansirs on the ground and other assets, fixed wing assets, et cetera. So again, there's usually always an IL-22M accompanying an A-50U. It isn't clear what happened to the one that was accompanying this A-50U. Again, the Ukrainians claim to have shot it down, but as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence that actually occurred.
Yeah. So I think that wraps it up. I mean, in any case, I mean, what's done is done. I think regardless of how it went down, that plane went down. I guess maybe my final question, John, what are the odds you think a crew would survive something like that happening to them? What happened in the video?
On an A-50U, 0. They're dead. They're all dead.
They can't parachute out?
I doubt it. I'd say it's probably, I don't think the A-50U has ejection seats, so I'm going to figure that it won't matter because most of the crew would have been fairly deep in the fuselage, not in the cockpit. It's a series of stations towards the center of the aircraft. So they're all hosed.
Gotcha. So it's too big and it happened too fast for them to reasonably evacuate the aircraft, even knowing they're lit up on the radar.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think they'd be jumping out before. I just think it's unlikely is how I'll put it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's all right.
The crew of the A-50U, all of the crew died the last time this happened, so I'm going to assume that these guys are probably all dead too.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm going to sleep well tonight knowing that, John. Great. So more A-50 crews dead. Good news. They're running. Eventually, they'll run out of A-50s, as you guys heard. And we've done our best to investigate the video, and John shared his findings. So I don't know, Erlend. Also, we're joined by 122, which is great to see. A Swedish guy. Good aid package from Sweden. I don't know. Did you guys have any questions or anything you wanted to add about this aviation stuff?
Not really. Do we want to do the Swedish aid now so that it's in one military section, or do we want to do it towards the end of the stream?
Yeah, I think we should probably do it now, and then we can go to Jonathan's segment. Yeah.
When is German aid?
Oh, right.
No, I'm left out. It's fine.
You're left out. You're not presenting your amazing aid.
Joseph doesn't want me to.
I forgot.
But you have a PDF here.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm doing it. It's fine. But you can do yours now. It's fine.
Okay. 122.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome to YouTube, man.
Yeah. Thank you. Amazing YouTube star.
How are you doing?
Yes, it's fine. It's fine. So I'm happy to present the Swedish aid package. It's the amount. It was 7.1 billion Swedish SEK. So that will be. I don't have the calculations in dollars, but it will have to do. It's the biggest so far from us, so that's great. And it contained artillery ammunition, 155, for almost 2 billion worths of Swedish SEK. It also contained 10 combat boats, combat boat 90, 20 group boats, G boats, and anti-aircraft robot 70, which I don't know which brigade that has been using it, but they have been scoring a lot of kills with it. A few helicopters and a few UAVs and a lot of other goodies. Light and tank weapons and recoilless rifles, which probably refers to the Carl Gustav, I would assume, since it says with ammunition. Medical equipment, I don't know any more details on that part, and our amazing MREs. They also got a donation for the to purchase new CV90s, and these are the new ones that are getting off the production line. So so far, I think they are to come out 2026, unless someone else will allow them to get their spot in the queue, because we have a few orders now. As you might know, a few nations would like to have our vehicle. So we'll see about that. And we also had some financial donations of various, nothing to maybe care about. The one thing I saw in the package, which I was happy about, was the combat boats, because they're a great resource for Ukraine to have. They can carry 18 soldiers if you don't count the crew, which is great. It's also armed with, I think it's 3 heavy machine guns. You can swap the machine gun out and use one of those automatic grenade launchers if you want to. You also have a railing, so you can drop mines or depth charges for subs. There's also, I think they have experimented a bit with some other, nice gadgets on it. I don't want to go too far into that, but there are other ways to utilize the vehicle as well. But that's the main purpose of the vehicle, or the main armaments of the vehicle. So that's a great resource for Ukraine, and they're bloody fast. They have a top speed of around maybe 40 knots, and they can reach around 320 nautical miles. So they're a great resource. They can go far and they can go very fast, and they have very high maneuverability. We use them in our archipelago mainly, and they can go into very shallow waters. They're actually used with our amphibious regiments. They drive onto rocks in quite high speeds, and then they drop the front ramp and you unload troops, which makes it a great landing vehicle for raids. So anyone else can do the math where these vehicles would be quite useful for Ukraine. So that's the particular vehicle that I'm very happy about to see in the aid package. I was hoping for something else in the aid package, but I'm quite happy with that as well. And the G boats, they're pretty much transport vehicles for maybe equipment, and because they can just carry 8 people, and you have the crew of 2 usually. They're quite fast, decent, around 30 knots. So that's our aid package. But I think it's an aid package that Ukraine needed, especially the resupply of Robot 70, the Robot 70.
I think maybe some other important Sweden news this week. I don't know why I didn't cover it in the main news, but it's great you're here. There was a deal signed between Hungary and Sweden, which to me, there was nothing, I should state very clearly, like nothing formal has been said by the Hungarian government or the Swedish government, but it seems to me that if Hungary and Sweden are making defense deals, that NATO accession, like Hungary will be approving NATO accession relatively soon. Is that maybe a fair statement of what occurred? Or
I would hope so, because if it's not, I don't know what Orban is playing at, to be honest, because I think he will piss a lot of people off. And Ulf Kristersson has been quite reluctant to travel to Budapest and see Orban. It was one of the things that Orban also said. He wanted Ulf to come there and talk to him, straighten things out. So and Hungary and Sweden have had a ongoing negotiations regarding Gripens, and as you know, we leased them Gripens already, but those negotiations kind of stranded for a long while, and now all of a sudden they seem to be working again. So yeah, hopefully that indicates the NATO ascension for us.
Yeah, hopefully a positive sign. Maybe one other thing I wanted to ask him about, Erlend, while we have 122 here, is the Abrams footage. Do you think we can pull that up, or did you want to talk about anything related to the aid package first? Go ahead.
Well, let's pull the Abrams footage up, but I wanted to ask, do you know any details about what version of the CV90 they will get? Because I've read that they will get. I've read that they got the Dutch just took their first deliveries of, which also opens some sort of possibility that the Dutch might wait a little bit, fielding their CV90s, because I think they still didn't field them. I think they still operate their old ones, and send theirs to Ukraine. And also, if you know anything about the Spike missile and Trophy APS system, because I know the Dutch ones took delivery of those, which are Israeli licenses.
No, don't know anything about that. It's not been talked about that much in detail in Sweden regarding the deal, specifically in detail. No, and the information is very unclear at the moment at what kind of. We just know it's from the new production line, but which ones and what specs it comes with, we don't know.
Yeah, I see Jeff corrected me there that the Dutch are not receiving, and that's true. Yeah, because it's MLU, so it's a midlife upgrade CV90. But yeah, they definitely will get the Spike missile and Trophy APS. So I don't, if they actually will get the same ones as the as the Dutch, then I mean, something must have been fixed regards to the Israelis, because they've been refusing to give tech to Ukraine officially, at least.
There have been recent developments, or not recent, but semi-recent, past half year, that might have triggered the Israelis to loosen up their tech release to Ukraine, if you know what I mean. Not getting into much detail, but Russia might have had a hand in other incidents.
Yeah, I just hope that's the case, because if they get the CV90s with the Trophy and the Spike, that's good news.
Yeah, because from what I've heard from a few friends, the CV90s with the Spike will be a very, very, very nice improvement. As we've seen with the Bradley, it's a great utility to have or have an anti-tank weapon like that on the IFV.
If I may briefly, the United States, we have been trying for the better part of 2 years, using whatever leverage we have available with the Israeli government, which is considerable, to get them to provide export licenses for things to be re-exported to Ukraine. They have completely and categorically refused in all cases. So I would not consider it likely that any Israeli kit makes it to Ukraine with the CV90s. I'd consider it beyond improbable.
But I think these are licensed productions.
It wouldn't matter. In the original license agreement with the Israelis, there's almost certainly a clause in there that would require a re-export license from the Israeli government for the licensed production units to be sold or transferred to a third country. That's almost universally how these agreements work.
Well, I hope they get some sort of anti-tank missile on their new CV90s. Yeah, Joseph, you wanted to ask, wanted to about the Abrams.
Oh yeah, I just all of the U.S. guys, soldiers, we're very excited about this footage for good reason. It's cool. I mean, I think it's cool. But 122 here knows his way around a tank, I hear, and I just thought it might be interesting to get a perspective from someone who knows a little more about tanks than me. So yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on the footage we saw and just how the Abrams is looking in Ukraine, man.
Well, it's looking quite all right, if I may say so. I haven't seen this footage before, so I'm just studying it a bit. Seems all right. The driver nice, good fire. Yeah, seems all right. I would be maybe that's a 1 kilometer kill, maybe. Yeah, that seems all right. It's better usage of the vehicle than I've seen from maybe their use of leopards in some cases, if I may say so. Yeah, it seems all right. Well, I will need to see a lot more videos before I can say, but I think using the Abrams and sticking to roads as they seem to be doing here and firing from a road as well is a good option, considering that the Abrams is quite heavy. The Leopard is of course heavy as well, but it has a bit more. It tends to operate a bit better in loose ground. So yeah, so I'm optimistic. The Abrams is a great tank. So
Yeah, Erlend.
it's really hard to say much more in detail about the from the footage without more combat or movement more specifically. So yeah.
Well, they're at least not as close to the infantry as we saw with the Leopard 2A6, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is it seems to be at least 1 kilometer kill probably that they're doing. So from the footage there, so it seems nice. And the leopard footage where it's just the one with when they drive into the forest and they basically had their guns. Though the barrel is actually probably much touching the infantry, is not ideal. I mean, it does the job fine, but the movement probably isn't the best or the strategic position for the tank to be. It would, if they're going to fire around like that, they can as well fire it from outside the forest belt. Regarding that video, but again, as I told you, Erlend, in a separate conversation, it's really easy to sit here and say everything about how you can and shall do everything, and not be in the actual combat environment. Just as a caveat.
Yeah, I mean, we just see a video where it cuts into the action. Of course, there are some more videos, before that particular scene when it fires into the woods, but we don't really know what happened until up until that point, and we don't see the whole picture. So it's easy to sit here and criticize, but I think what you wanted to see is that they utilize their the superior technology and being able to fire from greater distances.
From what we have seen a lot in the war, they tend to have a few quite close encounters, or they seem to get quite close sometimes. I don't know if it's intentional or if it's in their tactics, but a lot of videos, they're quite close to their targets, or tend to want to get close. That's not really the design of the Leopard. They have their optics and all that for a purpose, and it's more of a predator than a brawler, I would say. Yeah, I would like to see a bit more. You don't really see Western training oozing out of how they use the tanks. I would say that a lot of the times. Some videos have it, and a lot of others don't. but then again, maybe that's an choice they made, and they're operating it as they want to, as they should. But I'm just saying, they're not built to do certain type of combat. They're meant to be used in a certain manner.
I see actually a very good comment from Jeff here that the Abrams have been transferred to the 47th, which is a brigade that we know have been engaged in a lot of armored combat, and their Leopard 2A6s have been transferred to the 21st. Why do you think they've done that? Is it because they want to give them combat experience in a brigade system that already has some institutional experience and rotate them, or do you think it's because the Leopard needed to be relieved?
I think they needed to relieve the Leopard. I think I read something about quite few of them, the Leopards, being operational also. So there might be a situation where they needed to deploy a different tank that has more readiness up, so they can have more tanks actually fighting if they're in a combat-rich environment. Yeah, I see Jeff just commented, so I wanted to read what he was saying. It could be that, so they have more tanks that are operational, because we know a lot of Leopards, they've broken down, and the only way to fix a lot of them is to send them quite far back. Also, there's been rumors of a lot of lack of spare parts on the Leopards, along with some lack of HE ammo also. I don't know if those rumors are true, but yeah. So there might be a lot of different scenarios on why they would do that. But maybe, as Jeff said as well, they were supposed to get it earlier.
If I may say something about it, regarding the operational readiness, in a news report, in a German one, came out yesterday, they actually said that the 21st has only like 5 operational Leopards, of all they have in total. So just to give you a number.
Yeah, so that's very, very low. So if that's the case, then it might be that might be the case why they're rotating, maybe.
One thing to consider is that sustainment has become and is going to increasingly become a problem because the United States was the primary provider of POL, particularly lubricants, to essentially most of the NATO provided vehicles operated by the ZSU. So, even things besides the Abrams, the Leopards, the Crabs, most of that was being maintained using American provided lubricants and other POL products. That has all been cut off as of like 2.5 months ago. So there's going to be continued sustainment losses to basically all of their Western platforms until either Europe can figure out how to source this, or we can get our stuff sorted here in Congress and resume the provision of security assistance.
Well, I guess we have to say thank you to 122, and then back to you, Joseph.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Definitely great. Welcome back anytime 122 you want to share anything with us. It's always great to hear stuff from Sweden. So now we will turn it over to Jonathan for an interview with our guest today. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, President Zelensky, on the day before the 2-year commemoration of the initiation of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, said democracies should not withdraw from the historical process of protecting all the values that have shaped our modern world. On Saturday, it was the people of the world's democracies that were shaping the modern world by taking to the streets in solidarity with Ukrainian freedom, Ukrainian futures, and with one voice, Ukrainian victory. These voices were heard across the free world. We are privileged to be joined by the wonderful Alex Kokcharov, a perpetual supporter of the London rallies. Alex is a risk analyst with a focus on Ukraine and is one of the leading voices supporting the Ukrainian cause. Alex, welcome to Tochnyi.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Alex, if can I start with when was your first Ukrainian rally in the UK?
Oh gosh, 2014, the times of the Crimea annexation. But then, ahead of the start, before the start of the full-scale Russian invasion in February 22, rallies started reappearing because there were concerns over the concentration of Russian troops on the borders with Ukraine, both in Russia and also in Belarus. So rallies re-emerged in early 2022. I don't remember exactly when they did re-emerge, but I think definitely by January. And there were quite sizable rallies throughout February before the invasion, including on the evening prior to the invasion. So it's been an ongoing process. So, they started well before the invasion, the full-scale invasion in 2022 began. Because people anticipated that something was happening, something was brewing. They were really concerned about Russia potentially invading Ukraine, and people were protesting. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Alex. Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
fine.
I'm just
Yeah.
our audience can see footage in front of them
Of course,
from
yes.
the London rally, and I was just wondering, in terms of what you mentioned the 2014 invasion, and I'm curious what, in terms of motivations that people have for attending Ukraine solidarity rallies worldwide. Do you think these have changed over time, or have these motivations remained unchanged?
I think they have. Rallies in 2014 were overall smaller because it was, it wasn't a full-scale war, and Russia was operating using plausible deniability, claiming that these are not our soldiers, these are not our forces, they are the polite soldiers or the little green men. And there was ambiguity about, who these people in Crimea were. There was always a Ukrainian community in London for a very long time. It is much larger now, of course, but there was a significant Ukrainian presence back then, and Ukrainians were protesting. They would come to the Russian embassy in Notting Hill area and protest against what Russia was perceived to be doing. They were joined by people who were not from Ukraine, but from elsewhere, including the UK, who saw that what Russia was doing was undermining the international rules-based system and rules-based order, and trying to impose the use of force in order to change national boundaries and capture land, and especially by doing this, by claiming that, oh, this is not us, these are some local militias who are just trying to protect their own rights about the language or culture or autonomy, despite the fact that, it was quite clear to a lot of people back in early 2014 that it was the Russian troops who were in Crimea, and it was the Russian troops who were operating in Donetsk and Luhansk, starting this hybrid warfare.
It certainly was. Thank you for that answer, Alex. How did you feel about the turnout and the support at the rally in London? I think we both went. It's fair to say we both went to this. What did the turnout surprise you? What was your initial reaction when you arrived? When I left Marble Arch tube station, I didn't I think I said to you, I didn't know what to expect. I've been to a few of these myself. What was your reaction to it?
I have been to a few of these myself. I was obviously at one of the big ones in at the end of February 2022, immediately after the start of the invasion, and that was a very large one. I think more than 100,000 people have joined. It was a really sizable rally. I did expect that it would be smaller, that this time around that it would be smaller. But, when the march ended on Trafalgar Square, and you could see that the marchers filled both the upper level and lower level of Trafalgar Square, I would say at least 20 to 30,000 people were there. So it was quite a sizable rally. Yes, London has seen larger rallies, but the fact that people are still turning up and are showing to demonstrate that they do support Ukraine, that they have solidarity with Ukraine. I think it's important. So I did expect that there would be quite a turnout, not probably as large as in February 2022, but it was great to see a lot of people and a lot of flags and a lot of various Ukrainian symbols.
Flags matter a lot. You're right. There's an interview that I'd like to play later with a gentleman with a flag that meant a lot to him. But you're right. Turning up is and that visibility, it remains more important than ever. So can I ask what particular moments during the London rally were particularly memorable for you or poignant for you?
Well, it's difficult to say. Obviously, the the fact that there were so many people who were there, and that you had flags, not just flags of Ukraine, but also flags of United Kingdom, flags of other countries which support Ukraine, including Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, or flags of of the people who support Ukraine, such as Belarusians and Georgians. I am myself a Belarusian national, and I was there with two flags, a Ukrainian one and a Belarusian one. So I think the show of this solidarity and the singing of the anthem is obviously something that always touches you.
It was a very diverse event. I
Yeah.
found this one, wasn't it? There've been a lot of Ukrainian rallies outside Downing Street, particularly. But this event encompassed a wide range of the Ukrainian diaspora abroad, and a diverse range of people from across this particular country we're in, of the UK. The picture our viewers can see in front of them right now is of young people holding a gigantic Ukrainian flag, and I know that this was a feature of other rallies elsewhere. We have a member of our audience who sent us a picture that we'll feature and talk about later. Do you think that this the message that was conveyed from these rallies is something which is unique to this one, or has this remained consistent?
I think it remained consistent. I'm reading that there were more than 1,000 events globally in 69 countries taking place over the weekend in various locations, from Australia and New Zealand all the way to various countries in the Americas. And it wasn't just the capital cities. I know that even in the UK, there were rallies in Nottingham, in Manchester, in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, and elsewhere. So it's not just the capitals, the large cities, which had those events, but also smaller locations had events in support of Ukraine. And I think it's really important because the message is that people still care about Ukraine. People have solidarity with Ukraine. People want to see more support for Ukraine. People don't want Russia to defeat Ukraine. And it just demonstrates to me that, all this talk about the so-called Ukraine fatigue is nonsense, really. A lot of people across a lot of countries still very much care about Ukraine, and they realize that if Ukraine is defeated, if Russia is allowed to achieve its objectives in Ukraine, that it would be a very ominous sign, which would bring really dark times, for Europe as a whole, if not the world.
Yes, well said. Russia's war aims in this war have remained unchanged, haven't they? How could you, for people who are perhaps not as well versed in what the Kremlin has specifically said are its war aims about this war, how would you describe these to somebody who is perhaps unfamiliar? One of those people who, as we walked down Oxford Street yesterday, were looking out of windows of Fortnum and Mason, these kind of places, not to pick out this particular establishment, but that's there are a lot of people looking out windows taking photos of rallies.
Yep.
And my point is, these people are not as impassioned about they're not particularly they didn't turn up. Maybe they were working. Others chose not to. Others are unaware of the importance of saving not just Ukraine but Europe. How would you convey the importance of Ukraine's resistance to these people?
I think it's very important because currently Ukraine serves as a shield against Russian aggression in Europe. It is especially obviously pronounced in countries which border Ukraine and which are outside of EU and NATO, such as Moldova. We know that Russia is very open about its plans to subjugate Moldova as well. In terms of Ukraine, the officially declared objectives of the war are obviously complete nonsense. And in reality, what Russia is trying to achieve is to conquer territory, probably annexing all of eastern and southern Ukraine, thus depriving Ukraine access to the Black Sea, and to reduce the rest of Ukraine, rump of Ukraine, into a client state similar to that of Belarus, which is effectively a vassal of Russia, which doesn't have any independence in terms of foreign policy, and is run as a brutal dictatorship which represses its people. So this is the blueprint for Ukraine by Russia. Take about half of the country and annex it directly into Russia, all the way to Odessa and the borders with Moldova and Romania. And, for the rest of the country, leave it as an independent, so to say, state, but which would be fundamentally reduced to another Belarus, where its cultural identity would be destroyed, language would be persecuted, Russian language would be returned as a language of state affairs, and which would fundamentally operate as a vassal state of Russia. That's the objective, and the objective is to take all of this in order to present more security threats to countries which are on the horizon of the Kremlin, which include pretty much anything which was occupied by either Imperial Russia or the Soviet Union. And this includes Moldova, this includes the Baltic states, potentially even Poland and Finland. And we are talking about war with countries which are members of the European Union or of NATO, and this could potentially lead to a much larger war involving much of Europe.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate your answer. It's my pleasure to say that we are joined by one of our, two of our colleagues actually. Bernardo, who can relay something, his experience about the rally in Berlin, and Vasyl, who is currently in Dnipro and under air attack. And I was wondering if it's possible to bring. He seems to have disappeared. Okay. Yes. One of our colleagues, Vasyl, he lives in Dnipro. Dnipro is unfortunately at the moment under air attack. And but in the meantime, Alex, I'd like, if it's possible, just to bring in to give our audience a comparison of because obviously, as you said, this was just one rally, and I'd like to turn to Bernardo, who was in Berlin, and ask him the same questions. What was? Can you give me a quick mic check, Bernardo, while you're there?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. All right. So, how did you feel the turnout was for Berlin? And whilst I find the video, could you give us an idea of how this rally compared to others you've been to?
Yeah, actually, usually I'm at a rally in my city in Magdeburg, but there wasn't really a rally this year. So yeah, basically I went to Berlin. I think it was like around 3,000 people in Berlin. I personally expected a bit more in Berlin, but yeah, it was a big and nice rally. Many flags there. So yeah, was quite nice there.
Could you identify a moment which you found particularly poignant? A speech that you heard?
Yeah, so maybe I just describe the setting a bit. Like you can see, we are in front of the or behind the Brandenburg Gate, the Brandenburger Tor. At first, it was slightly cloudy, and now then the sun basically broke through the clouds. It was very nice, a bit windy, so the flags were like good waving in the wind. And yeah, the sun was really nice shining. So was a really nice setting. If you can see, if you're looking through the second pillar from the left on the Brandenburg Gate, you can see yeah, the Embassy of Evil, how I call them, the Russian embassy, which is sadly behind the Brandenburg Gate, a couple of buildings behind this. Sadly, we didn't find a way to get rid of these yeah, flag of yeah, evil on this embassy. So but yeah, we had way more flags, and yeah, was quite a nice setting there. On the right to us was the American embassy. It was nice to see the US flag also waving there. So yeah, everyone was at times looking up to the embassy and to the flag, and was hoping for a good sign that hopefully from the US is coming a bit more aid in the future again. Yeah, everyone is waiting, basically.
Well said. That will help.
Yeah. We had some nice speakers. Was really good. We had some Ukrainian heroes there, right? Who are in treatment in Berlin in the hospital, which showed up on the stage. Many volunteers were there, and I think this was the most important part for me. Also mentioned in the speech. Many of these volunteers are women, and many people also in the Ukrainian society which are doing much are women. And like the women in Ukrainian society, you can really see it inside and also outside of Ukraine. It's a very important factor which takes a huge responsibility, and yeah, you could feel this there in Berlin. It was yeah, quite nice to see. Very modern society, in my opinion.
Thank you, Bernardo. We'll certainly return to this later. I appreciate it. Alex, if I could ask you, what some of the conversations which I don't think are unique. I think these are fairly ubiquitous across these kind of rallies. It's how we define terms such as liberalism versus illiberalism in the year of 2024 and in the third year of this war. It is perhaps it is something which people are constantly having to redefine how democracies react to this brutal, tyrannical invasion of a peaceful, sovereign country. I was just wondering, how would you answer this question? How do we define liberalism and illiberalism in 2024 for people who are not in Ukraine?
I think the key to this definition is striving for freedom for individual citizens and for a nation as a whole. And obviously, any country is on some sort of scale in terms of where it is from the point of view of human rights or democracy. But I think the objective is the key thing is not only where it is right now, but where it is as a society is striving to be. We know that Ukraine is striving to be a free nation, which has free will to join alliances which it believes will benefit its society, its people. Ukraine wants to be part of the European Union. Ukraine wants to eventually be part of NATO. It wants to be integrated into the Euro-Atlantic structures and be part of the global West. And it shares the commitment to human rights and individual freedoms of citizens. And it wants to expand those. And yes, under circumstances of war, there are constitutional measures which have to be taken, such as martial law, which prevents, for instance, Ukraine from holding election right now. And yes, this will be used by various critics of Ukraine, most notably Russia, to claim that this makes Ukraine an undemocratic country. But I disagree with this assessment, because we know that Ukraine holds free elections in which incumbents lose and step down from power in peaceful manner. This is what happened in 2019, when previous President Poroshenko lost the election and stepped down. And then there was a parliamentary election in 2019, in which the composition of the parliament has changed quite significantly, and many MPs were not returning into the parliament. Ukraine has this, and Ukraine has very robust local elections with mayors being elected, with local councillors being elected, and this is very, very important for Ukraine. But yes, some of the measures are part of constitutional provisions which say that during martial law, no elections can be held, and Ukraine must respect those constitutional provisions. From my perspective, it's not an indicator of Ukraine backsliding on democracy or on its commitment to human rights and freedoms of its citizens, but it's a necessary thing during the time of war. I'm sure that once the war is over, Ukraine will have competitive and fair elections in which, not every person who is currently in power, in the local council, in the parliament, will be returning to their positions. There will be some people who will be voted out, because that's the nature of Ukrainian society. It's a society which removes those people who are not seen as fit to serve their constituency, the country or the city or the local community, and removes them through the process of election. But ultimately, Ukraine has demonstrated that as a society, it is moving in the right direction. It is moving towards greater recognition of human rights, including all of its aspects, such as rights of women, rights of minorities, rights of indigenous small languages, and so on. And it's complete opposite of what Russia has turned into, which officially conducts the so-called elections, results of which are pretty much well known, I can tell you with great certainty that Vladimir Putin will be declared the winner of the March presidential election, so-called election, simply because the outcome of this so-called election will be tightly controlled, and it doesn't really matter how people vote, because the electoral commissions, which are under complete control of the government, will produce whatever numbers are given to them. Yeah.
Well, the one voter in that election has already turned out before breakfast. Um, uh, the Ukrainians have shown that they are able to distinguish between. They're able to rise above factionalism when it comes to politics and unite at a time of war. Thank you for that answer, Alex. If I may, I'd like to bring in a friend and colleague here, Vasyl, who's currently in Dnipro. And Vasyl, can you give us a quick mic check?
Hello, do you hear me?
We do, loud and clear. Vasyl, are you safe? And could you tell us a little bit about what your experience in life is at this moment?
Yeah, Jonathan, now I am safe. I think maybe 20 minutes ago finished one more attack, Russian drone and missiles attack. I think it was maybe 10 explosions or maybe more, or maybe less, because sometimes it's difficult to understand what is blowing here, or exploded here. Some were very near because it was very loud, very loud. And also I know that one of my clients' fabric was damaged. I were called maybe 10 minutes ago. About injured and killed, I don't know. I haven't heard such information. I hope everyone is alive.
Thank you, Vasyl. Did you get sufficient warning before this attack, or is this the type of attack where you received no prior warning?
I'm not sure what time it was, because we have air alert very often, and that is why I am mostly look at extra information. We have some extra information about information from our, I think, air defense units. They inform, is it can this air alert influence on Dnipro or not? And I'm look for their information, and their information was very recently. I think it's 1 minute before they written that you have to go to shelter because it will be explosions. But I think whole Ukraine air alert, it was for maybe dozens minutes. But particularly when you are in Ukraine, when you are in Dnipro, if you will go in every air alert to shelter, I think you can't work, you can't do anything. That is why you have to you have to use more, I think, more information.
So anybody,
But sometimes some rockets when hit Dnipro, they were before every air alert. You heard explosion, and after that, air alert starts.
Thank you, Vasyl. Anybody up on the panel right now, of course, please feel free to ask Vasyl or Alex anything. And of course, anybody in the chat, the same. We'll just take a moment for
Jonathan,
questions.
I would maybe ask Vasyl real quick if there's any thought to the reaction from Ukrainians about all the demonstrations.
It's really appreciate, and it's I think it's help to understand Ukrainians that we are not alone. It's very significant, important. I can tell about my opinion and my friend's opinion with whom I have spoken. It's it show us that we are not alone. It's really important. Thank you everyone who stand with Ukraine. Thank you everyone who went on rally, who support Ukraine as he can by information, by donation, by every deed. Thank you everyone.
Thanks. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Joseph, and thank you, Vasyl. As we know, and Alex, as you know, the solidarity for Ukraine does not exist on just one day a year. I'd like to play an interview, if I could, with a gentleman who makes this happen on a regular basis, and we'll just take a second to load.
Do you mind if I take a photo of your signs? I really like them. Can I ask how much do you bring these signs out to the street? Is it every week?
Yeah, we got the protest 10 Downing Street every week, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, Wednesday 6 till 8 p.m. At the moment we do it on Friday because of the Palestinian protest. We do Friday 6 till 8 and Sunday 3 to 5. Every single week.
Every week, even in the rain,
Doesn't
in the
matter.
cold,
Rain, sun, every single week.
I haven't been to every weekly one. I wish I could have done. I work.
That's great. Thank you for your
as
support.
many as I can.
We really appreciate the help for people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the winds, through the cold, the snow, the hail, they're there three days a week. Alex, what's been your experience of these of the evolution of these rallies in London that you've seen?
I try to come to these rallies as much as I can. I don't go 3 times a week, sadly, but I try to come at least once a week. Most likely on Sunday, but sometimes I go on Friday evening as well. The numbers are not particularly great because these events happen, 3 times per week, and people have other things in their lives. They have children to raise, they have jobs, they have other commitments which keep them away from these rallies. But there are always people, there are always at least several dozen people, including in really foul weather, including, under rain or sleet, and in cold, and in, there are some days in winter when it's really windy. People still come. And I think it's very important because it shows that this initiative is ongoing, it's needed, and it keeps the reminder about the importance of supporting Ukraine alive. So I have massive respect for the organizers of these rallies. There are always speakers from the organizers who are all obviously doing it, in their own free time, and nobody pays them for that. But they are trying to help this initiative as much as they can. I think it's absolutely great and very important that Ukrainian community still is organized around this issue of support, that it holds those rallies. There are occasional, larger rallies which are linked to events such as the second anniversary of the invasion. But, often when there are particularly terrible events happening in Ukraine, such as, mass missile strikes, more people turn up because they feel the urgency and the need to turn up and to show their support, to show their solidarity with Ukraine, to show that it's not all right to be throwing all those missiles and UAVs at Ukraine and killing Ukrainian civilians and including children. So it's extremely important, and occasionally these rallies take place not near Downing Street but next to the Russian embassy. Location outside of the Russian embassy is quite unfortunate because it's a very busy road, Notting Hill, and that road is busy with buses in particular, and it's got very narrow pavements, and people are not allowed by the police to hold protests on the side of the road immediately next to the embassy. So you only have the pavement across the road, which is incredibly narrow, and there's simply not much space. That's why holding those rallies on Whitehall, where there is more space, and where the rally doesn't stop the pedestrians and is not an impediment to pedestrians just walking past, is a better location. Though obviously, I think a lot of Ukrainians would have preferred to protest outside of the Russian embassy to remind the Russian diplomats who are here in London that their country is not liked and what their country is doing is horrible and criminal. I was actually at a protest outside the Russian embassy earlier today, and it was not a Ukrainian protest, but a protest by anti-Putin and anti-war Russians who live here. There is an organization called Russian Democratic Society, which was set up in 2022, and they hold events against the war and against Putin. And they held this event today. There were not just their flags, but also Ukrainian flags there. And they chanted that they are against the war and that they support Ukraine. They are also raising funds for Ukrainian refugees to assist them with leaving Ukraine and settle in wherever countries they end up. So there are these initiatives even by Russians who live here, because not all Russians who live, especially those who live outside of Russia, are buying Putin's propaganda and are supporting Putin's war.
Thank you, Alex. And it's impossible to escape the fact that we just have to watch interviews with the pilots and the captains of these Black Sea vessels that launch attacks against Ukrainians, that are launching attacks against Dnipro right now. We can't mince our words about this. They are murdering bastards, and I'd like to bring in Vasyl, who has an update on what exactly has just struck his city. Vasyl, could you tell us? Could you give us an update that you've received in the last few minutes regarding the number of missiles which have struck Dnipro?
I can only inform that 3 rockets were destroyed and 3 drones were destroyed. whole quantity of missiles and drones, I haven't know yet. Maybe after. And also, I know that several people are injured, but it maybe changes in this, because one of I'm not sure, or rocket or maybe drone hit house, one house, not
How's this?
not apartment building, but
Vasyl, you go to work every day. You lose sleep during these air raids every night. You then wake up in the morning and you live your life and you look after your family. And from a great distance, far away, people in Russia are launching these attacks against Dnipro, against the power stations, against its very important hospital that you have there. Could you give us an idea of the scale of this particular attack, just from your own subjective experience as one man in Dnipro right now? Is this attack heavier than normal, or is this just a standard part of a Ukrainian's week in Dnipro?
Jonathan, it's complicated to answer, but I try. First of all, I want to say that I don't want to adopt to live under missiles, drones. I want to live in peace, but I understand that peace may be only if Ukraine will win, because if we will lost, me or my family or other Ukrainians, I don't want to even imagine what will be. That is why I see only one way. Also about Russian terrorist attacks, we hate them, absolutely hate them all. They are all guilty, except those Russians who are in our military services, in our, if you know, RDK unit, or who left Russia and donate and make a contribution to Ukraine and Ukrainian army.
Thank you, Vasyl. I hope Ukrainians have seen some of the solidarity which has been expressed worldwide this weekend.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's very important. It's crucial important when you see thousands of people in London, in London, in Barcelona, in Paris, in Stockholm, in many cities, countries, in Washington, in Toronto, in Prague. I will not say every capital and every city, but it's very important. When you see this, you understand that other people understand what the fucking shit. I'm sorry, what the fucking shit is Russian invasion, Russian cruelty, Russian terrorism, and it have to be stopped, because if it will not stopped, it will continue against another countries.
Thank you, Vasyl.
Will explode all world, not only Ukraine.
There's some common features which exist at solidarity rallies across the world. And Alex, I was wondering if you could describe.
Do you hear me?
Vasyl, we hear you. I think your connection dropped off for a second. Can you hear us, Vasyl? We'll try and cycle you up, Vasyl. Do get underground and stay there. Thank you. And we'll bring you back up. Alex, could you give our audience, could you give everyone an idea of some of the features that?
Somebody hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us? I think that's the issue. Alex, just while we sort out a couple of tech issues, and thanks for sticking with us, Alex. The common features that we see at these rallies, could you give us an idea of something which is a reoccurring thing people take to rallies?
Yes, absolutely. First, I think what's important is that these rallies show massive international solidarity. It's not just Ukrainians who are displaced by the war who go and protest. It's also people from those host countries, but also people from all over the world. London has significant populations of diasporas of people from Poland, from Baltic states, from Czechia, there are Belarusians, there are Georgians, all kinds of people, and they all show their solidarity with Ukraine. The same goes with the British people. A lot of British people turn up to these events because they understand that this is an existential war for Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for its independence and freedom and its survival, and it's a war in which Ukraine needs support of every country which can provide this support. So I think one of the key features is how international these rallies are and how unifying they are. They are uniting people from various backgrounds, various origins, various countries, uh, standing for what is right. And right now it is to support Ukraine and to arm Ukraine and to provide Ukraine with the means to defend itself against the invasion and uh, preferably to defeat the Russian invaders. Ukraine is not asking for other countries to send armies to defend it. It's only asking for weapons so that Ukrainian army can defend Ukraine and can defeat the Russians. And I think this recurrent chant of "Arm Ukraine now," which you hear across a lot of rallies in a lot of countries, is extremely important because saying that Western countries are going to be with Ukraine for as long as needed is not good enough. Ukraine needs weapons now. We all have seen what has happened in Avdiivka, in Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine, because Ukraine simply doesn't have enough ammunition. I've been reading today that in the area of Kupiansk in Kharkiv region in eastern Ukraine, Russians are using 6 times more artillery shells than the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians simply don't have enough artillery shells. They have to ration them, and they uh, definitely cannot advance. But even defense is incredibly difficult, and Ukrainian forces have to increasingly rely on first-person view drones, FPV drones, to hit targets across the line of contact, because they don't have the shell. They have the artillery guns, but they don't have anything to fire from those artillery guns. And it's a very desperate situation. Ukraine needs arms now. We can't wait for indefinitely. Um, uh, when there is political will or financial um, resources, uh, we need to act now. And I think this message of urgency of situation that Ukraine really needed support of Western countries now. I think it's also something that is happening across rallies globally, not just in London.
Well said, Alex. That chant of "Arm Ukraine Now" has been heard, has gone from the street and into through the windows of Whitehall and into policy regarding Ukraine. And I was wondering if something which I've seen quite a lot at Ukraine rallies, people holding placards bearing the pictures of fallen Ukrainian warriors. It's been a particularly moving sight, but there are other things which I find people take to these rallies which hold significance to them, and I'd like and I hear what you're saying about that diaspora from Eastern Europe, particularly the Baltics. There's a lot of Lithuanians, Latvians that I meet at the London rallies, and I'm sure that this is not limited to London alone. I'd like to play, if I could, an interview with a gentleman who had a flag with him yesterday, and it was of particular significance to him. So I'm just going to roll the tape on this one.
Can I ask you a question about your flag? I'm intrigued about the signatures that you have on it.
First of all, I'm not Ukrainian. I'm Lithuanian.
Are you Lithuanian?
I'm Lithuanian, yeah, but obviously I support Ukraine. You don't need us to say. Actually, on one kind of group online, and there was like an auction to buy a flag, right? So I auctioned and kind of won this auction. But for me, it's more than the money, you know. By the time I received this flag, I was informed by the person who was organizing this auction that some of the people who signed this flag had already kind of been killed. So yeah, so it's like more than a flag. This is more than, you know, just a piece of whatever. But
this is part of their legacy.
Absolutely. So it's very kind of symbolic and very kind of powerful meaning of this flag.
And you have 93 on it. Were these people from the 93rd Mechanized Brigade?
They were, yeah, they were.
They are legendary.
They are legendary, exactly. And I have a picture showing them holding this flag with all the signatures as well. I can show you on my phone if I can still find it. So yeah, with all the messages and everything, you know.
Where are you from?
Ukraine.
Where in Ukraine?
Kharkiv.
That interview for the end. Alex, if you're still there, could I ask you, is this an experience which you've encountered?
Yes, you know, I know people whose family members have died in Ukraine. I have family in Ukraine. None of my family members have been killed or injured, but I have friends who have been killed during this war. So I think a lot of people have this experience, and it's particularly of importance for those people who have their family members, their brothers, their sisters, their fathers killed, including on the line of duty. But in some cases, people were killed in their own homes, which were attacked by Russian missiles or UAVs flying into those homes. So, you know, the longer this war continues, sadly, the death toll and the number of people injured in Ukraine will continue to grow. We see that Russia is using this indiscriminate shelling and bombing, especially of cities and towns in the east, which it claims that it is liberating by fundamentally reducing to rubble. Just today, the Russians conducted missile strikes on Konstantinivka, an important city and railway hub in Donetsk region, north of Avdiivka, and they destroyed a railway station. You know, and that's what Russian so-called liberation is. Russia is just reducing those cities and towns to rubble, to complete devastation zone. That it becomes impossible to defend those places, and we witnessed this in many locations across Ukraine, in Severodonetsk, in Popasna, in Bakhmut, in Mariinka, and now Avdiivka, which was captured by the Russians just recently, because there was pretty much nothing left to defend. The city was destroyed completely.
Sorry for the loss of friends, acquaintances, and for not the countries like mine and NATO partners of Ukraine, that we did not do enough since 2014, and this has cost the lives of so many fallen flowers of Ukraine. Thank you for bringing us that story, Alex.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We're going to wrap up there and finish with a picture from one of our audience members.
Real quick, do we want to do a German aid to Ukraine report?
It's already super late and stream is done, so I would have just like 5 slides, nothing too serious from this week. So if you want to just pass, it's fine.
Up to you, man. We can double up next week, or you can do it now.
No, it's yeah. I can do it very fast.
Yeah.
All right.
German aid.
No, it's fine.
Can we talk about the ambassador who leaked it?
Sorry, what did you say?
Didn't an ambassador leak some stuff? No, I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, the CFOX, but it's not that serious. I didn't even mention it. A lot of the stuff which happened this week, for example, the Taurus vote, which isn't a Taurus vote, for example, I didn't mention because it basically doesn't mean anything yet. So yeah, if anyone has questions for me, please go ahead. But yeah, starting with Tuesday, the UDI signed a memorandum of understanding with BDA Deutschland on the joint study of programs or opportunities for cooperation on air defense systems and concepts, in particular to counter drones. The potential areas of the partnership include research, development, production, and more. Then we are already on Friday. I have a small update for you regarding the 120,000 1-2mm artillery shells pledged by Germany. According to a Spiegel report published on Friday, Germany bought the ammunition in Bulgaria. This would mean that this is not the artillery ammunition mentioned by the president of the Czech Republic, which also means that large parts of the 1-2mm ammunition, and if I remember correctly, he said 300,000 rounds, have therefore not yet been purchased and are still available. So yeah, great news. Going on to Saturday, yesterday the German government made public that they have provided Ukraine with 32.3 billion euros in military, humanitarian, and financial aid since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion. This is a surplus of of 4.5 billion euros in provided aid since the last update made in December 23. And for those who are asking, of these 4.5 billion euros, it's about 1 billion euro in military aid in the last 2 months. On the same day, it was announced that the German... Oh, sorry, let me change the slide. It's already too late for me. On the same day, it was announced that the German tech company Helsing has signed a memorandum of understanding with Ukrainian partners. The goal is to implement AI-based assistance into Ukrainian-made drones, which is huge improvement. And the last one for today, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has just announced today that Germany is providing Ukraine with a further 100 million euros in humanitarian assistance. The funds are to be used to rebuild destroyed water supplies, hospitals, and houses. Yeah, just as I said, it's very, very small segment for today or for this week. Joseph, you can take over.
Thank you, Germany, to Ukraine. And thank you to Alex Kokcharov for your time. We're going to do a couple of things to wrap this up on what has been a remarkable and a momentous weekend. We're going to look at a picture sent to us from an audience member. If we could just get that up now. This is from our audience member, Kaylee. And Kaylee was in Washington. And Kaylee sent us this picture, which we thought we'd use as our permanent YouTube thumbnail for this particular episode of Tochnyi. She attached this text that she would like to be conveyed. She said that she approached the Lincoln Memorial from the side. As she rounded the front of the structure, a sea of Ukrainian flags appeared. Amongst the yellow and the blue flags were representatives from the Georgian and Lithuanian communities, their flags waving in the wind. The people in attendance were diverse, but their mood was similar. There was an overwhelming feeling of community pride, solidarity, and defiance. Thank you for this picture, Kaylee. This is one of two pictures of the week we have this week. The second being of Artem here. On the front line of Europe, Ukraine, and the wider world's resistance against Russian invasion, tyranny, and fascism. Just before we finish, I'm going to give Vasyl a chance to say anything he wants and to have the last word. Vasyl, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you. I hear you. Last word. It's not good, I think, to say. Let it be what I want to say. Thank you all for supporting Ukraine. Hope we will win and it will be a peace. Thank you all.
Vasyl, thank you everybody who's joined us today. We're going to close as we normally do. So please don't go anywhere. Ukraine is not going anywhere in the fight for its freedoms and rights and those beyond its borders. Thank you once again for joining Tochnyi. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
Slava
Slava.
Slava Nasi.
Смерть
Смерть ворогам.
Smith.
On behalf of the brave.